The renowned martial arts master Bruce Lee once said, "Be like water, making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around or through it." These are wise words, and something that I've come to appreciate in terms of true masters in the physical arts, which turns out to be quite spiritual in nature as we learn a bit more about how fluidity and the ability to adapt to any situation finds its power. We certainly know the power of water in this congregation, especially recent events. But this theme, the title, Entertaining Angels, and I'll just throw this out at the beginning. Perhaps you too have entertained angels without knowing. I'll just put that as a question for now. I've been in ministry long enough to hear lots of stories, including some staff members who came to become members at Wayfarers Chapel who arrived there by, I would say, mysterious circumstance. One person in particular, their car just happened to break down right at the entrance of the driveway and came up to the visitor center and asked, what can I do? And this is back before the prevalence of cell phones and having to actually ask another fellow human being in real time as to what to do. That person actually entered into becoming one of the staff members at Wayfarers Chapel for many years. And then other stories of just these conversations and incidents. One of them was involved being on a plane and a conversation that was deeply important that met this person where they're at, and a moment of reaching down to pick something up and then looking around and didn't see the person. Was it an angel? Who knows? But it was the right thing at the right time, and we here at Wayfarers Chapel, the Sweetwater Church, we are very angel positive in our belief. In fact, if you remember the old visitor center, used to have a mirror, and it was designed for children's size, and it says, "What does an angel look like?" And it has a mirror. So they could see. That's what an angel looks like. So this whole mystery of angels and who they are and what they are, it's not such a big mystery. And in our theology course, we have a whole piece about angels in training. And I will posit that each of us, all of us here, are all angels in training. We're trying to become more fully divine, letting that divinity to flow through us, that divine love, that divine wisdom. And a lot of what Swedenborg talks about again and again is the difference between things that we are doing of our own accord versus what is divine, what is allowed to flow through us, and to feel that current, to feel that energy flow through us. So I wanted to make this connection with water, angels, where we were, where we are. Who knows exactly where we're going, but looks like we're also going to be, once again, eventually near the water. And I found this pretty fascinating because, over the centuries, millennia, people have been drawn to the extremes, whether it's the ocean, whether it's rivers, but being near water, and they started doing some research on this. Studies have shown that people who live near or next to a body of water are 10% happier. Look at that. They went further on this and found that people who lived within a mile are 22% less likely to experience mental health disorders such as anxiety and depression. So, we've got things going for us here. Just being close to what they term blue spaces out there, just knowing. Part of our psyche knows how far we are from a large body of water, that tends to increase our happiness. And marine biologist Wallace Nichols calls this, quote, "the immeasurable sense of peace that we feel around water," or, quote unquote, "our blue mind. Water gives and teaches us so much, but the very simple everydayness of it makes it easy to take it for granted. That said, we all know there's nothing quite like the feeling of drinking cold water, clear water when we're parched, and the sheer joy of driving next to a crystal clear lake on a sweltering day. It gives us that assurance. So I wanted to start off here a bit, some of that gratitude and just kind of furthering things that we already intuitively know of a little bit. And I've been fascinated by this whole concept as well. I mean, just the breaking of waves, it creates changes in the ions, and we actually get kind of charged up by that energy exchange that happens there. It actually creates ozone every time a wave is crashing. So being near the ocean, walking along the beach, and all of these are other reasons why this brings us a sense of peace. So here we are on Labor Day weekend. We can celebrate in various ways all that we get to experience in terms of celebrating our labor force, having a day off, having that. I gotta say, like it gets a little extreme with the 3-day weekend. It becomes the topic of conversation, and I've gone around this past week, and starting about midweek last week, when I went to the grocery store, it's always like, so what big plans are you doing this weekend? It's becomes a whole event. People taking a couple days off, Thursday, Friday, making a 5-day weekend. People get really excited. The expectation of what's going to happen. So kudos to all of us. We're here on Sunday, and I got to be there. I didn't say, well, I'm working. No. This is, that's not what this is about. It's, I get excited about other people's excitement, and this was a part of that. We do have a lot to be grateful for, regardless of all the things that are challenges in our modern day. But I wanted to dig down on this piece from Hebrews that had been read. Let mutual affection continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. And I've always been, kind of interested in culture and different cultures showing hospitality to the stranger. And I've certainly experienced this myself in my travels to other countries. But the concept of showing kindness, hospitality to stranger, it's powerful. It's been, it helps me to understand some of the stories as well as to what Jesus is talking about. So it's been powerful in the Middle East for many centuries. And even, it's one of those things that cultures around the world all kind of have some form of this showing hospitality to strangers. And I thought about this a little bit more. I mean, it goes back, I've studied a little bit of the deeper history as well, and part of it is just basic level where if we are showing kindness, there's something about that moment and that exchange of being shown that kindness that gives us a positive spin for the future. That if we are in need, we too might be the one that needs to be shown the hospitality of a stranger that does not know us. And that goes back, even prehistory, if you want to study some of that. That's a bit more on the theoretical, but I do have some concrete first-hand knowledge of this as well. My time spent on the island of Oahu, Hawaiian Islands. And I grew up in Northern California. You see the big cities there. You take public transportation on BART and other places. And it's public transportation. I don't think it's changed a whole lot. Generally, has not been the friendliest, kindest place. Over the years, I've witnessed lots of things there. I'm sure we all have our own experience. But one thing I noticed culturally when taking a bus, other public transportation on the islands, it's very much a part of the culture there. I witnessed time and again, someone that was a bit elderly and having some challenges, and the youth getting up, popping up quickly, recognizing, here, have them take this seat. And I was very impressed with that. And I came to understand a little bit of the culture that goes into that, which has to do with some of their origin story, which has to do with the goddess Pele, which is the goddess of volcanoes and fire. And one of the origin stories is that she started off in Tahiti as one of those origin stories and then made her way, and then the creation of the islands, as you see it kind of spread out, was part of that. She ends up residing on Big Island, and the fire, the place where she resides is Kilauea. And I don't know how many people have been paying attention to recently. We've had some volcanoes going, including Kilauea has been pretty much going nonstop in the past several weeks with lots of lava flow. But I mention all that because Pele isn't just Pele, who sits around the volcano. Pele's a goddess that can take the form of anyone and any human, whether it's male or female, old, young. And so part of the culture of hospitality on the islands is that you may, if there's someone hitchhiking, whatever, you can figure out the story. If there's someone that's getting on the bus, if you're not showing hospitality or kindness, there's this built-in sensibility that this could be actually Pele in a different form. And I found that just endlessly fascinating as to how this has an impact on people's behavior in recognizing the hospitality of strangers, because if they didn't show this and extend this hospitality, Pele, who is known to have a fierce temper and anger, could then potentially, cause another volcanic eruption, and it could, run through your home village or anything. So, it's not the greatest thing to have this fear about doing an action, but it's real, it's tangible. I experienced this, I witnessed this when I was living there. So, to be clear, these words from the Proverbs are an invitation not only to be generous and caring towards the stranger, it also implies that divinity is within each and every person. And so I'll invite us all to just take a moment to glance around everyone here. Recognize there is divinity residing within each and every one of us. That little simple act of recognizing divinity residing is powerful. And we do that intentionally at the Garden Church as part of our liturgy there. And I'm going to swing back to that at the very end of the sermon as well. But when we dig a little bit deeper on the gospel story, it is about this piece about seeing one another through those eyes, at least trying to attempt to see with the eyes of divinity. And this next reflection by Father Rohr kind of gets at how recognizing the divinity within all of creation, not only the natural world, and we're here near the ocean, we have lots of blue space. So theoretically, we're all about 10 to 30% happier because of that. It does have a piece of our psyche already just by being here. So I like this reflection of Father Rohr as to how his deepening journey in Christianity opened himself to seeing this possibility in others. He starts with a quote from Thomas Aquinas. It says, "If something is true, no matter who said it, it's always from the Holy Spirit." Father Rohr reflects on how his commitment to Christ and the inspiration of the Holy Spirit have continually helped him recognize God in other religious traditions. He says, "In my own life, going deep in the Christian religion of my birth has enabled me to see the same spirit and love in other religions as well. It has been quite a journey from growing up in a Catholic, quote, ghetto in Kansas, and hardly even knowing any Protestants. And yet, at age 14, I was sent to study with the Franciscans in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they gave me an expansive theological education. One of the best courses I had was on the Hebrew Scriptures, which gave me a great love for Judaism. It's probably why I emphasize the prophets so much, because I realized the prophets really weren't about what we call today retributive justice. They were about restorative justice. When we stay with their message, There are these magnificent passages towards the end of the books that invariably point toward God. God eventually says through the prophets, I'm going to love you anyway. I'm going to redeem you by my perfect love. I'm going to love you into wholeness. That's from Isaiah and Hosea. In 1969, when I was sent as a deacon to Acomo Pueblo in New Mexico, I had only a basic introduction to the indigenous religions. I observed how mothers in the Pueblo would show their children how to silently wave the morning sunshine toward their faces. Just as many Christians learn to bless themselves with the sign of the cross. I realized that indigenous peoples had contemplative prayer long before we Franciscans ever appeared. The rediscovery of Christian contemplation opened my eyes to the Buddhists, the Sufis, and their teachings and practitioners. Buddhism taught me the phenomenology of perception, what's going on in our brains. Every world religion at its mature level discovers some form of practice to free us from our addictive mind, which we take as normal. Starting in the 1960s, our increased interaction with Eastern religions in general, and Buddhism in particular, helped us recognize and rediscover our own very ancient Christian contemplative tradition. The Sufis' deep love of mysticism, especially as expressed by the poets Rumi and Hafiz. They often capture the own stirrings of my own heart. My latest discovery was Hinduism, which is considered the oldest world religion. In the early 1980s, I gave a retreat in Nepal. Between talks, I would just walk the old streets, go into the temples, and try to remain invisible. I remember these lovely Indian women coming in so gracefully, wearing saris and paying no attention to anything else except perhaps the flame or the oil they were holding. With what reverence they would bow. What do we think they're bowing to except God? The mystery. Like the wind, the Spirit blows where it will. So I love that reflection by Rohr, really integrating a lot of the great world religions and also getting at the mature side of all world religions that point to the same thing, have the same sensibility at the center, at the heart. And that hopefully opens us up to this hospitality of strangers. A big part of what we're going through right now is a reminder of how radically different and countercultural that is presently here and now, to extend the hospitality to the stranger. The wedding banquet is another one that points out pretty starkly the difference between pride, ego, and humility. And it's an interesting parable because it begins with the description of Jesus being invited to a special banquet. Jesus is being observed closely by the guests, and especially by the Pharisees. Some of the guests take their special positions at the banquet in order to be seen by the other guests, to let everyone else know they are a guest of honor. Jesus, knowing the Pharisees are watching him, closely points this out, and then pointed out the social convention related to their relationship with God. Jesus shares the parable and points out how their pride and ego are a false self, that it's drawn seductively. To feel special, to be felt like you're apart. The guest of honor in the ancient world would have shown everyone else your social class. And this is what I love about Jesus. He is unafraid in every moment to just speak the truth to power, and he takes this opportunity, basically pointing out that God is residing within all, to move beyond these superficial things, this feeling of superiority, the feeling like there is a difference in how we stratify our society. And the invitation to sit at the lower place and then to be invited upward, it's not a natural thing that we do. In fact, that whole piece about, wanting to take our place in those positions that are elevated to be seen by others. We see this pointed out by Jesus time and again throughout the gospel stories. It said, but when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may come and say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Now, the last part of the gospel, I find it extremely interesting, because after telling this profound spiritual parable and this truth, Jesus directly confronts the host himself, who has invited him. And we can assume that Jesus was invited because of his good reputation, because of his growing fame. He was invited because of all these things. And he was also invited as a guest of honor. And this is where it starts to get a bit real. These words of Jesus speak for themselves, and I'm going to end the sermon this way, with those words. The only other example I will share about this is one of the things that I've come to appreciate now that I've been with the Garden Church and as one of the ministers there for over 3 years at this point. I've grown to love not only where we are, what we're doing, the interactions with those that are not the elites of society, the ones that are stopping by and just asking for food. They're hungry. And I get to have those interactions. And I'm always amazed by how much theology they know, how much they've read of the Bible. But the thing that we do every Sunday there is to have not only the worship service from 4 to 5, but to have a community meal served at 5 o'clock. Where the only thing required is to be hungry. It is a form of the same wedding banquet. We're not asking people for money. We're not having people sit in certain places, and it's very intentional. And so to be kind of have a front row seat as to witnessing what that is. I got to say, as much training as I've done, as many years as I've spent in ministry, I continue to be blown away by some of the insights that I have in those conversations of people sitting around the meal, sharing that space. And some of those, I guess I can enter in my own version of the entertaining angels because, I will get up and do something and they're gone. They're not there, and I don't see them again. So I leave this as a concluding thought, something, as a reason, when we're out and about in the world. The parable and the way of just extending some form of generosity of kindness. It's a way of sharing the gospel in small ways, in big ways. You never know where a person's at when we meet them. You never know their backstory, where they're coming from. So when we are in those positions, and we can extend even a smile, that's what people will know about our faith journey too, whether we're Christians or not. They even have those songs. They'll know we are Christian by our love. So I'll end with the quote from Jesus. He said also to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers and sisters or your relatives or your rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. May the Lord so help us all. Amen.